President Barack Obama visited Ireland in May 2011, and he delivered a public address to the Irish people that was televised from outside of College Green, opposite Trinity College, outside the home of the Irish Parliament of the 18th century. And in his wonderful oration, he only made reference to two figures from Ireland's history. One was the former Taoiseach Prime Minister Garret Fitzgerald, who had just died that weekend. The other was Daniel O'Connell. And some people were surprised why, of all of the figures in Irish history, Pearse, De Valera, Collins, Parnell, Grattan, they were surprised why he was so interested in Daniel O'Connell. And the reason was that growing up as a young man, Barack Obama's hero was Frederick Douglass, the great black abolitionist who had escaped from slavery and became this great orator and opponent of slavery. And Douglass's great hero, when he was growing up, was Daniel O'Connell. Frederick Douglass would write about how he learned to love the name of Daniel O'Connell as a child because he would hear his master, who was probably his father, spit out the name with a curse. Douglass, who was forced to eat with the animals in the troughs, learned to love the name of Daniel O'Connell. And when he escaped to freedom, and when he escaped to the north and wrote an account of his time as a slave, his friends told him that it probably wasn't safe for him in America. And so he decided to go to Europe. And he told them that the first place that he wanted to go to was Ireland, because he wanted to meet his great hero, Daniel O'Connell. And he met him in 1844 in Dublin. Now, this was the year after the great monster meetings, when O'Connell had spoken to huge crowds all across Ireland. And Frederick Douglass didn't believe that any one man, no matter how great he was, could speak to such huge crowds. But when he heard O'Connell in action, he realised that he had been wrong. He said that listening to O'Connell was like listening to the rolling of thunder across a dusty summer's afternoon. O'Connell spoke with Douglass at an anti-slavery rally, and with characteristic self-confidence and vanity, he introduced Douglass as the Black O'Connell of the United States. And the two men became great friends. And when President Obama was a university professor in Chicago, he would talk to his students about how come there weren't orators like Frederick Douglass anymore? How come that style of oratory has gone out of fashion? Well, Douglass and that style of oratory was based in part on Daniel O'Connell. And of course, that style of oratory would do so much then to influence Barack Obama's own speaking style. So Daniel O'Connell, across the world in the 19th century, wasn't just seen as the man who had won Catholic emancipation for Ireland. He was seen as a champion of the oppressed, no matter where they could be found. And again, people are somewhat surprised by this attitude, because even in the 19th century, a lot of abolitionists who were white, who opposed slavery, did it because they thought it was bad for the white man. It corrupted him. They didn't necessarily always believe that the black man was equal. Well, O'Connell certainly did. He understood their plight because he felt that he had suffered from a similar kind of slavery. He felt that he had suffered a similar kind of oppression, and that's why his heart broke when he heard the stories of the American slaves being oppressed. And when the Catholic Emancipation Bill was passing in the British Parliament, he was approached by a lobbyist for the slave group in England. And they said, we control 8 votes. And if you promise to shut up about slavery, we'll vote for emancipation. Otherwise, we'll defeat you. And O'Connell said, no deal. I'd rather lose than compromise. I won't win emancipation by sacrificing another people who are being oppressed. And fortunately for him, that lobby group did not vote against emancipation, or his great life's work would have been destroyed. But he was prepared to do that. He was prepared to throw it all away. And Daniel O'Connell, in the 1830s, didn't just speak for the rights of Ireland. He went around Ireland and Britain speaking for the rights of the oppressed American slaves. And he did it in language that was aggressive and violent, that offended a lot of Americans. It even offended Queen Victoria when she heard that a man from Alabama had come to the House of Commons to meet O'Connell and shake his hand. And when O'Connell asked him, "Where are you from?" and he said, "Alabama." And he said, "Are you a slave owner?" And the man said, "Yes." Then O'Connell slammed the door in his face saying, "I will never have anything to do with a slave owner." And Queen Victoria was offended, saying, "What brutal manners this savage has. You know, you can't treat visiting dignitaries like that." But O'Connell didn't care. He went out of his way almost to offend his American audience. He said, you know, Americans go on about George Washington being such a great leader. George Washington was a hypocrite because he owned slaves and he only freed them on his deathbed. He said the Declaration of Independence wasn't such a great document. It was a lie because it said that all men were created equal. But they weren't. He said he would never set foot on the soil of America because it was a polluted, corrupted country. And until the sin of slavery had been removed, he would never visit it. And he predicted that some great calamity would come, some great catastrophe, and that would remove slavery from the United States. And this alienated a lot of his supporters in America. Even those Irish Americans who didn't believe in slavery. They were a little bit embarrassed that an Irishman was telling another country how it should run its business. The Catholic Bishop of New York wrote to O'Connell saying, you know, shut up. The Irish American group said, we're not going to send you any more money. And O'Connell said, fine, I don't want any more money from you. I'm not going to take any more money if you are supporters of slavery. And a lot of these Irish American groups closed down rather than continue with slavery or continue supporting O'Connell. And O'Connell's language across the country, it inspired millions of oppressed. The way he could move an audience to tears by talking about the pregnant slave women who should feel that they are going to be giving birth to a blessing, but who instead feel that they are going to be passing on a curse because the child will be taken off them and sold into slavery. He would paint pictures of those women and he would reduce his audiences to tears. And it almost led him into a duel. In 1836, a new American ambassador was sent over to Britain, a man called Andrew Stevenson, a man who had been in the House of Representatives for a number of terms, very distinguished American politician from Virginia. But he owned slaves, and O'Connell delivered a speech denouncing him, accusing him of being not just a slave owner, but also a slave breeder. He was exposing the evil at the heart of slavery, because when children were born into the system, they were also born into slavery and could be taken off their parents and sold. Husband and wives could be broken up, families destroyed because of the sin of slavery. And he denounced Andrew Stevenson, saying, this government should not have accepted him into here. And Stevenson was furious, and he wanted to fight a duel. But his friend said, no, you should ask O'Connell to clarify if he exactly said those words. So he wrote to O'Connell, and O'Connell wrote back and he said, no, I didn't say those exact words. And Stevenson rushed to the newspapers and he said, O'Connell's backed down. He's denied saying those words. Well, O'Connell knew what Stevenson was going to do. So at the very same time, he went to the newspapers to clarify. He said, yes, what I mean is, I didn't say those words. I actually used words that were far worse. These are the exact words I said. And it was even a worse insult for Andrew Stevenson. And now Stevenson was furious and he challenged O'Connell to a duel. And O'Connell refused. He said, I think a duel is a silly way of deciding who's right and who's wrong. Whether I kill you or you kill me, that doesn't disprove the justice of what I'm saying. And Stevenson was appalled. He said, you're a coward. And O'Connell goes, well, I don't care if you call me a coward. I wish I'd been a coward 20 years ago when I killed a man in a duel. I don't care anything about your insults. And that was something that really offended people in Britain. The fact that O'Connell deliberately excluded him from the code of honour about duelling. He would insult people, but then he wouldn't back up the words with the duel. He wouldn't apologise. He wouldn't withdraw the comments. He would just say, I don't fight duels. and I don't apologise. Tough. And for many that marked him out as a scoundrel and a coward, but O'Connell, well, he had his reasons and he didn't care what they thought. Well, Stevenson's actions created uproar, not just in Ireland and in Britain, but in the United States. John Quincy Adams, the 6th President of the United States, was back in the House of Representatives, and he took to the floor of the House of Representatives in 1837 to declare that there was a conspiracy on behalf of the slave owners to murder O'Connell because he was such a vehement opponent of slavery. And you see the American papers cover this. Some in the South denounced O'Connell, many in the North denounced Stevenson, but it became a big international incident. And it left Stevenson much embarrassed because he never got his apology and he never got O'Connell to back down. The world's first anti-slavery convention was held in London in 1840, and O'Connell spoke at that. And beforehand, he was approached by a number of women delegates who wanted the right to speak. And he thought about it and he said, you know, this is exactly the same issue. There's no difference between men and women. There's no reason why the colour of their skin should determine anything. The same way I don't think someone's gender should determine things. I think and that marked him out as an early supporter of the women's movement as well, and showed that he was also ahead of his time there. And he spoke at that World's Anti-Slavery Convention. And Charles Lennox Remond, a great black abolitionist, heard his words. And he said afterwards, all my life, I thought I was an abolitionist, but I was wrong. Listening to O'Connell made me realise what true abolitionism was. And he described listening to O'Connell as being like, again, listening to thunder. He said it was like watching flashes of lightning flash across the sky. Flashes of lightning, the words were so powerful. The words were so illuminating. The words were so powerful. And O'Connell then continued that work in the 1840s, never wavering, even though it cost him financial support, never wavering, even though it lost him support in Irish America. And it also led to a split in the repeal movement. We'll be talking in later weeks about the Young Ireland movement, we're talking about them next week and again later on this week. Well, the Young Irelanders, they were offended by O'Connell getting involved on this issue. John Mitchell, he had it as his life's ambition to end up in Alabama owning a plantation with 300 slaves. And when he was arrested in 1848 and sent to Van Diemen's Land in Australia, he escaped and made his way to the South, where he became a close friend of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis, and where his sons fought in the Civil War against the Union, because he believed in that. And even the ones who were against slavery in the Young Ireland movement were disgusted with O'Connell for talking about foreign affairs, for talking about issues that had nothing to do with Ireland or Irish freedom. But these were issues that meant a lot to O'Connell. The lines of Byron that he always quoted, hereditary bondsmen know ye not, who would be free, themselves must strike the blow. Hark to the fact that he saw himself as a slave. The Thomas Moore song that he loved to listen to was, "Oh, where is the slave so lowly?" Because he believed that he was that slave so lowly, condemned to chains unholy. And so it ate away at him. And he believed that justice had no colour, and that if something was wrong, you had to say it was wrong, no matter who you offended, no matter what it cost you, because otherwise you were a coward, otherwise you were betraying your values. And that's why he gave such a great welcome to Frederick Douglass in 1844-45. That's why Frederick Douglass went back, believing that Daniel O'Connell was a great champion of American freedom. That's why on the eve of the American Civil War, all of Daniel O'Connell's speeches on slavery were published in the United States. And that is why when Daniel O'Connell died, Frederick Douglass said that this was a huge blow to the cause of freedom in America, because they had lost their champion in Europe. And instead they were replaced by men like Marr and Mitchell, who not only didn't care about the slaves, but some of them who thought slavery was a good thing. And O'Connell, for them, was their champion. He was their hero. And in his own way, Daniel O'Connell there was proving that he deserved the name the Liberator.